Okay.
I'm going to work on chapter 12 and 13.
Okay. Oh, so what, you guys have got that sorted out? What about that chapter, you sent me 10, but is 9 got the red things taken out too?
I'll check.
Yeah, you better check it. Yeah, I better check it. And as I said, you know, for you and Christina, are really a big help, and I appreciate it. The, you know, when the stupid automatic brain that spell checks things tells you that there's a spelling problem with an obvious word, change it. But any other thing, just leave, because I'll pick it up in the proofs. And if you see some obviously crazy stuff, just send me a note in your letter about it. Don't change anything. And Christine, as far as we're talking about the underlining, I don't know how chapters started to get underlined, but somehow that underlining in the old system, not from now, used to be italics. You couldn't get italics in the old system. Huh?
Do you want it changed?
Oh, if you can make them italics, sure, but don't. I mean, don't start now from the old ones, but anything from here forward. Yeah, if you can change, if you can do underline, if you can change to italics, but don't mess up the whole thing. You know, keep an original copy, because otherwise you never know. There's a lot of italics, primarily to emphasize things and to wake people up so they don't go to sleep. They're helping me on volume 2 of that, James. That's why we're talking about it, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that they're helping me. Because I'm so, you know, I'm really, you know, overwhelmed with trying to get the thing some sort of shape. So we were talking about Aristobulus, weren't we? Turning sick of servility, or we got beyond Aristobulus then? Huh? Who remembers? Huh? Nobody remembers.
Well, where we're at?
Yeah.
Caesar released Aristobulus.
Yeah, okay, Aristobulus. Yeah, that's right. I knew we were on Aristobulus. So, since you all know ancient history so well, you of course know that Caesar fought the civil war against Pompey, who was responsible for the storming of Jerusalem in 63 BC. So this civil war was fought about 15 years later. So we're in the 50s sometime. We're in the 50s, or maybe even high 40s BC. I don't have the exact date of the Civil War anyone, because Caesar was assassinated after the Civil War. So I know Caesar was assassinated, I think, in 44 BC. So this is somewhere around, you know, in the couple of 3 or 4 years before that. Because later on they do have a statue of Pompey in the Senate that Caesar is, according to the Shakespeare view of things, assassinated under. So you can try to put these in perspective. I mean, how many here know anything about Roman history? Yeah, I mean, this is something that, you know, some of your teachers in high school maybe should have helped you out a little bit with. Maybe they should have thrown away some of those textbooks with different colored passages in it and stuff like that, and actually taught you something. And I hope some of them did. Maybe you had a good teacher. But I mean, you know, this used to be to most students sort of second nature. So it kind of worries me that I heard something the other day. I couldn't remember what it was, but people didn't even know this sort of elemental thing anymore. They don't even have any memory of these things. I can't remember what little given bit of information was, but it escapes me. But it's really difficult, because the internet is good, but it's like instant knowledge. It's not. It doesn't really show consecutiveness or context, sequentiality, and I'm not sure the stuff you learn on the internet really sinks in. So I'm not really sure. You know, reading books used to be painful, but because it was painful, it used to actually make an impression. I'm not sure, you know, clicking something on the internet and then going to the next thing and erasing it that night, I'm not sure that really has the same effect, so it's worrisome for you guys. It's your world, you know, you know, you're going to have to deal with it. Okay, so let's see if I can find out. So we have Mark Antony doing pretty well in putting down revolt in in Palestine, and then it's 55 BC when this war goes on. I have a note here. And Pompey and the Senate fled across the Adriatic, and look at that. This poor Aristobulus, he never wins but he loses, does he? He's finally going to go back and take over his crown, and the Pompey supporters poison him on the way back. That's really tragic for the Jewish people, because honestly, all these things, to my mind, contribute to the modern situation. You say, how can these things contribute to it? They can, because all these things turn on a hair. Historical processes, you know, if the Jews didn't have the Herodian family in control in Palestine, there wouldn't have been all of the revolutionary activity. There wouldn't have been all the upset, all the agitation. There wouldn't have been all this messianism. There wouldn't have been Christianity, and so on and so forth. There wouldn't have been any Holocaust. The Jews would have never left Palestine. I mean, you can drive a whole scenario for that. You know? Just that little thing. Just that little thing. How come? Because this is the monarchy that they actually obviously felt something for. And if that would have been restored at that time, all subsequent history in Palestine anyway would have been different. And since all subsequent history in Palestine influenced all of us and how we look at the world, then everything that we think would have been different too. So you got to think that is like a pivotal event. And yet it looks like nothing, doesn't it? So if this guy had made it back to Palestine in one piece and managed to survive, but I suppose after Caesar was assassinated, they would have gotten him too, so I suppose it all would have been. But you never know. With Octavius, who was Caesar's family, winning the Civil War, he probably would have tried to honor some of the things Caesar had done. So if Caesar had allowed this guy to be king again, he might have confirmed him and not brought in the Herodian family. But as it was, the Herodian family played all the people off. And have you been reading this history here? I mean, Herod is just the manipulator of the manipulator. He's the Saddam Hussein of his day. I mean, he has no pity. He doesn't understand what pity is. He's totally brutal, utterly violent, and you know, he's just, to my mind, one of the several horrendous peoples of history. So when people call him the Jewish king, not that I would be embarrassed if it were true, to hang that on them among that, it's just like, that's the first misnomer of history. But go out there in the big world and try to convince anyone of that. You know, you're like, you know, you'd be faced with total incomprehension. Herod, of course, he's a Jewish king. He's a Jew. He's the king who tried to kill Jesus, isn't he? And so on and so forth. And there it is. I had a professor at college, I mentioned that at one point. If I didn't, I'll mention him again. He used to say, poetry is truer than history. And that is absolutely true in this particular instance, for sure. Because the poetry are the Gospels. And the Gospels are 100 times more paid attention to than any historical, I would say 1 billion times more paid attention to by people in the universe than any historical point you might make. And that's been so for 2,000 years, and that's likely to continue so for as far in the future as you can go, regardless of books like Josephus. So, but that's the numero uno. You say, well, what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with it except for the fact that it creates an impression that is negative, and it doesn't happen to be true. The Jewish king or someone did not try to kill Jesus. A king usurped the power in Palestine with Roman help, may have tried to kill baby Jesus, if you want to call him that, if in fact the event ever happened, which I doubt very, very seriously anyway. But that's me. So all these things are so important. So, as I said, maybe this Aristobulus would have survived. And if he had survived, the Jews would have never gone into exile. There would have never been a war against Rome. There would have never been. The temple would never have been destroyed. All the things we've witnessed ever since, over 2,000 years, you wouldn't have had any crusades. You would have had millions of different things happen. It's just incalculable. So things turn on a hair. Someone told me about Abraham Lincoln being assassinated. I think that was a pivotal event too, because it undermined all of what the Civil War achieved. They were just doing an Abraham Lincoln thing on Orange County television the other night, doing his biography with his wife and so on. So I was talking to people I was watching it with, and that's so pivotal because 100 years of American history were altered by that particular episode. Because if Lincoln had survived the Civil War, just had good security that night, the whole experience with the South would have been different. The whole situation with emancipation would have been different. The whole Reconstruction would have been different. The guy, if he would have been healthy, probably would have had as many terms president as he wanted. He probably would have had about 2 more terms. Would have had a good 8, 10 more years to sort things out in the South. We'd have never had all the problems we have in this country that followed after the Civil War and Reconstruction, because the guy was so sophisticated and intelligent and had such common decency and insight that he would easily have been able to work a lot of those problems out back at that time. And some very negative-minded person felt that this was something that should be done. And the whole country has suffered. You say the Kennedy assassination was the same? I don't think so. I lived through the Kennedy assassination. That really didn't affect a lot. Something, but not a lot. History didn't change because of that. The forces that were at work were at work, and it was a terrible thing and very frightening and quite horrifying. But I don't think it had that much historical effect. I may be wrong. But the Lincoln thing and things like this are like incalculable. I was thinking of, again, I'm sorry to go off the topic, but ruminating a bit. I was thinking about, I was watching that thing about Napoleon. They're doing a Napoleon one on television too. Have you seen that? And you could say, what if? I mean, the guy was a maniac, and so on and so forth. But he had everything that he wanted if he had just calmed down and relaxed a bit. Didn't want to be emperor and all these kind of things that he wanted to be, and hadn't gone out to Russia in this ridiculous campaign that he undertook, he probably would have achieved all the things that he was trying to achieve. And then the whole history of Europe would have been different too, because to my mind, the Hitler thing is just a second Napoleon event. I mean, he did the same thing Napoleon did, wanted to go to England, couldn't win the Battle of Britain. Napoleon couldn't get his troops over to England, so he turned on Russia. Hitler did exactly the same thing. Couldn't get his troops over to England, so he turned on Russia, got himself chewed up out in the steppes of Central Asia, the same way Napoleon did, and you had all these millions and trillions of people killed for no reason. So, all these things are weird. History is an interesting subject for that reason. Not that we can do anything, but certainly look into it and see what we can work with. So this Aristobulus thing, no one's even heard of this person. If you told 10,000 people about this person, I would say not even one person in 10,000 would even know what you're talking about. So it's really interesting. Well, okay. So interesting enough, he was sent back in honey. Rather, he was preserved in honey until later on. Antony, when things settled down and the Civil War was over, could deliver him to the Jews. Antony did honor Caesar in that regard, obviously, to be buried in the royal sepulchres. And I was in the museum in Jerusalem some years back, and they have a plaque there from somebody, and the inscription is a bit not clear, but it looks like a plaque from a royal king who was brought back by somebody saying, I brought this person back and buried him in the tomb of his ancestors and so on and so forth. And it really looks like the person who brought this person back in the Israel Museum. I don't have much more information about than that, but I was struck by, this is the only person I could think of that plaque would relate to. Notice here, death came to his son Alexander in Antioch by order of Pompey. So Pompey is still at work destroying these people. Again, it doesn't look like Octavius and others or Caesar would have done this kind of thing. But look, he killed him with the sword, sort of like in the Gospels. And Herod killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. meaning he beheaded him, which is what we're talking about here. And notice Josephus doesn't miss many beheadings. Any significant person that is beheaded usually pops up here. So when we have some people in the literature we're familiar with who don't pop up here, Josephus really likes, I don't think he likes executions, but he is focused on executions, and he knows who's executed and who isn't. Then we got to ask ourselves seriously, you know, why isn't he in Josephus? Or how did Josephus miss him? I particularly asked that question about James, the brother of John, who in my book I have very serious doubts about as a historical character. I think it's an overwrite for another character who is beheaded at that time, that is in Josephus, and the people writing the material, as I tell in my Christian origins class, are just are embarrassed by the situation, don't want to be forthcoming about certain things. And I think we're talking about a brother of somebody who is beheaded at that time, but it is not James, the brother of John. It's the brother of somebody else. It's someone, the brother of James. Actually, I think it's Judas, the brother of James, who is beheaded at that time. We have him in all the early literature, and we have other material about him. And I think that often these writers, when they come to something that they don't want to be forthcoming about, or they don't want you to really know about, they just switch them around a bit. And it's easy for a scribe to do that because he doesn't dislocate the manuscript. You know, he just puts in a different, he puts in a different word there if he wants. And in fact, you could just change the manuscript, could rub this out and just put those things in without even having to copy the whole thing all over again. Because it would be really tough to copy manuscripts. So all that kind of thing, I think, could be done pretty easily. You could just cut out that particular section from a parchment, for instance. Parchment, if you know, the scrolls anyway are like this. They're in a sort of roller like Jewish synagogues are today. And here you have this parchment. But it's not a continual roll thing, and these rollers are not part of the parchment. That just make it easy to manipulate the parchment. Parchment just rolled up in a roll. You see the scrolls, they were rolled in scroll jars. So, but what are they? They're skins sewed together, and you can actually in the scrolls see the stitch marks where they are stitched together. So you could even unsew it and take a piece out and put another piece in if you wanted to. But the point was, you wouldn't want to recopy a whole manuscript. So you want the word count to be more or less the same as what you replace it with, if you are replacing it. I think there are things being replaced in some things, or a codex too. Take a page out, put another page in, but not recopy the whole thing. So that's my explanation for why certain things are changed if they are changed. In this particular instance, the beheadings, watch the crucifixions. See who's beheaded and what they're beheaded for. See who's crucified, what they're crucified for, and why. That's very important. And Josephus is the only and best source for that for this part of the world. Even though, as I said, he's not a very, someone that you particularly maybe want to get too deeply involved with. He'd probably come out on the short end of the stick like the people who were in the cave with him. You know that episode, right? You want to know the episode of the people in the cave? No, the ones who were in the cave with Josephus. You can get that far in reading the War, huh? What was Josephus in Galilee? He says he was a military commander up there, but I don't know if he was. He might have been like a priestly commissar, someone sent up there to monitor the situation, but I don't think he was the overall commander like he presents himself. But anyway, he says he was. Well, when he came time to, the defenses that he was supposed to organize against the Romans were so pathetic that the Romans just pushed them away like flypaper, of course. And then it came time for some of the places that he had set up the defenses for, whatever, collapsed and people were killed, butchered, and so on. Came time that he was in a difficult situation with about 5 or 6 other people in a cave, And the traditional way for the extreme groups was to commit suicide, like Japanese tradition. But Josephus gleefully tells us how he and a comrade of his drew the short straws, killed everyone else in the cave. They were then supposed to kill themselves, then went out and surrendered to the Romans. So this is what, you don't want to get too involved with Josephus, because I said you'll come out with on the short end of the stick. He's a survivor, but not a survivor with a great deal of principle. So I can't blame him for trying to survive, but still I do blame him for killing others. So this is one of the, what's wrong here? Sedition. These people are killed, executed by Romans for sedition. That's usually the situation. So this is considered a rebel, someone who refuses to give in to Roman authority, even though he's a royal personage. He's beheaded by Pompey and others. He doesn't go too deep into Pompey's death. He just mentions that he was dead. This is all very complicated family relationships here. And at the end of that chapter, after you can read the complexities of this, look, he talks about the Jews in Egypt and in the temple there where Onias, another Onias had founded, and they did battle with the Romans at a place called Jews' Camp. It's interesting data here. Again, it's all ripped off from another historian. Josephus wasn't alive to witness any of this. Antipater then is this Roman sympathizer, basically a stooge. If you want to be kind, he's a Roman civil servant of Middle Eastern origins, Greco-Arab origins. And but as a mark of favor, Caesar bestowed Roman citizenship on him, exempted him from all taxation, gave him all other honors of friendship, and confirmed the high priesthood on his chosen candidate, Hyrcanus. So basically, who's the power now, really? It's Antipater is the power. He's the one who has Roman support. Hyrcanus has done his work. He's basically done his brother in with all this fighting, infighting, and is now nothing but a stooge, if you like, of Antipater. What's going to happen ultimately to Hyrcanus? After all these things, all the services he does to Herod's family, what's his thanks? You guys reading this too? Not just me now, I've read it. What's his thanks? He gets executed by Herod ultimately. Herod executes everyone. He stamps out the Maccabean family, root and stalk. That is the tragedy of the deaths of people like Aristobulus and his first son. He has another son, Antigonus Aristobulus. What happens to him? He gets beheaded too. All the people who oppose Rome get beheaded. So you see, the beheading of John the Baptist is right in line with that. These are not people who are, involved in innocent activities. These are people considered to be enemies of Rome, and this is what their fate is. And John the Baptist does not get killed because a woman enticed a Herodian governor into feeble-mindedness. John the Baptist gets killed because he's involved in what the Roman Herodian authorities consider seditious activities. So how do you know? Because follow it. The Romans don't make mistakes. Oh, they may have made a couple maybe, but no, they don't make mistakes. Not for things like this. If a person is perceived as threatening and seditious, subversive, he gets executed. That's it.
They're going to kill his whole family, right?
Yeah, oh, he's going to kill everyone, but it's going to kill him. It's just terrible, really, what happens here. It's very tragic. If you can read through the lines here, I mean, I know I'm particularly affected by it, and I'm a sentimental person, but it even makes me almost cry when I read it. And I know to you guys, it just seems like a gobbledygook, data. But if you can get through all the names, it's encyclopedia, you can get through all the names and the data, you see the tragedy. You see the tragedy mounting. It's just one tragic thing after another. And it's all going to go down to the destruction of the temple and all the burning and starving that's going to go on there. And all that has been recast in history as the Jews deserved it. It's so painful to me. Others, even the people of a Jewish background that I know, don't understand it, don't feel pain, because they don't read Josephus. They read the rabbinical literature. They have no idea of this history. You think if someone was Jewish, someone would teach them this? No, they don't teach it to them at all. Nobody gets taught any of this. It's very sad for them and all the others, because they might know better who they are, where they came from, if they would read some of this. But you also need a teacher to pull the stuff out for you. You can help now do this with people if you ever teach, but you need people who are qualified to do this. You need people who have been shown by other people what's really going on here. What the thrust is. What's so moving about it. If you've had a teacher that isn't moved by it, well, you're not likely to see what the moving things are. If you have a teacher who is moved by it, maybe if you feel fortunate enough to have had that. I wish I had someone who would move by these things. It would have been easier for me, but it's always nice to discover for yourself. But anyway, then of course you're 10 steps ahead if you have such a person who can show you the way. So this is so tragic, and as you say, you're seeing the tragedy of it here. It's just painful to read through it. Everyone's been killed right left and center, but you see a thread here going through this, which is leading inevitably, inexorably to this terrible end. And then what we all perceive, sing songs about, everything millennium later. That's what's so amazing about all this. Look, if this had happened in Tajikistan, there were people in Tajikistan at this time, or the Kalahari Desert people or something, or Eskimos in Greenland or something. There must have been terrible things like this going on to you and things like that. Nobody cares. Nobody knows about it. Nobody cares about it. It's all forgotten. But this series of events is riveted in everyone's mind. Not just worldwide. Not just the Western world. The whole world now. Because Islam is also heir to this in some way. They've got it all messed up too, but I don't get into what they've messed up. They don't know what they're talking about, but they're heirs to it in any case, without ever having read any of the stuff. They're heirs to the ideas of this period. And then, of course, further east, the Japanese and other cultures have inherited it from their contact with Western civilization. So it's spread everywhere, and everyone is totally riveted on this period. It's really weird, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Judging by the popularity of the Mel Gibson movie and so on, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. And there it is. Literature is truer than history. So, but you have a chance here, if you ever do any teaching or talking to people, to actually have an interesting discussion with people, because you can show them things that they don't know. And they know the literature, but they don't know the history. Okay. So this other son of Aristobulus, let's see, he tries to get some sympathy for him, but the Romans take this as impudence. The impudence of Antigonus past belief, the son of an enemy of Rome, a fugitive from Rome, inheriting from his father a craving for revolution and sedition. No, I don't think Josephus wrote that. I think he copied that right out of someone else's book. Probably an Herodian civil servant, the one I was telling you about, Archelaus, I think his name was Archelaus of Damascus. Is it Archelaus or Nicolaus of Damascus. Because you see, this is so full of hostility to the family that it has to be someone who was antagonistic to the Maccabean family, and Josephus really wasn't. He even claimed to have Maccabean blood, you see. So it would have to be some Herodian official or someone like that. And you see, Caesar didn't consider Aristobulus a rebel against Rome. You see, he wouldn't have freed him and sent him back. So a son of an enemy of Rome, How is Aristobulus an enemy of Rome if Caesar freed him and sent him home? No, I don't think so. He's an enemy of this party of people that are running things after the war. And he has a craving for revolution and sedition. You see, they're all going to get beheaded here. As we move along here in this chapter, around 54, I think, page 54 or so, Hyrcanus was too lethargic and spineless to be a real king, because he's, after all, a priest king, but I don't think there are any kings anymore. He's just high priest here. Herod, overflowing with energy, soon found scope for his active spirit. And what's the first thing he does? He puts to death this bandit chief, Hezekiah. You got that? What page is that on? 50, huh?
54.
Yeah, 50. It's around 50 BC. He puts to death this bandit chief. Well, is Hezekiah a bandit chief? I'm sure he's not. He's a revolutionary. This is the big, all through here, we've seen the word bandit in Greek less time, the same as the crucified thieves in Jesus' crucifixion scene in the New Testament, presented as bandits. This is the point of view of the author. Hezekiah, how do I know he's not a bandit? First of all, he has a Davidic name, doesn't he? If you know the names of the Davidic king, Hezekiah is a very good Davidic king name. He's the last Judean king before the captivity, I think. But in addition, it turns out this Hezekiah later on is going to be the father of who? Judas the Galilean. Another Judean king named Judah. And Judas the Galilean is the head of a whole movement in this period that Josephus is going to focus on, which is basically the revolutionary movement that persists throughout the first century. And we don't hear how Judas the Galilean, we don't hear about the fate of Judas the Galilean in Josephus, which is odd. It's hard to say what happened to him. Though someone with a similar background, Judas Sephareus, as we'll see, is killed in some of the revolutionary events that take place around the time of Herod's death. But how do we know this Hezekiah is more than just a bandit? Because his whole line, finally, when the war against Rome, right before the war breaks out in 66 AD, the son or grandson of Judas the Galilean puts on the royal purple, meaning he's making claims as a Davidic king. And that's 100 years after this. That fellow's name is, I think, is called Menachem. And Josephus calls him the son of Judas the Galilean. It seems to me he must have been his grandson. And the other party, the high priestly party, objects to it and throws stones. They think he's, blaspheming or something. In the party strife leading up to the war against Rome, how many have gone up to that far yet? You see there's a lot of hostility there between the establishment and anti-establishment forces, the Herodian priesthood, basically, and the other collaborating groups, and the revolutionary groups. It's a little bit like Baghdad today. Only we're the heavies like the Romans, which I hope we're not really. I don't really feel we should be and are, but we're perceived that way by some. I don't think our soldiers behave like Roman soldiers, except for this ridiculous stupidity in some of these prisons, which is really shocking that any Americans would think that they should be doing that kind of stuff. We never did that much in the Second World War and other places. It's humiliating to have that go on. In any event, the situation is like Iraq to some extent here in Jerusalem. I don't like to withdraw that as a parallel. But Hezekiah is one of the people representing the crowd. He's a Jesus type, in effect. He's one of the people representing the people, not the establishment. Which seems to be the popular groups are all coming out of the people. The establishment is being held in power by the Romans and the Herodians and their paid mercenaries and others. People are always against this establishment. They want a restoration of the Maccabean line, but that's not possible. They want a restoration of the Davidic line. So this Hezekiah is the first of this Davidic line. So I've read a lot into that now, but you see, that's how I know this is not a bandit. This is more than a bandit. This is probably the first person that we have here, the implications that he's making Davidic kingly claims. Now, I read all that in, but it's there. You pursue it, it is there. Okay? Is that clear to you guys? So, he's not just abandoned. I hope you find this interesting. I do. To me, this is one of the most interesting periods. You can get through what's being written here to the actual pith of it, and there's no way, its only way to do it is to dig it out like this. If someone writes it in a book, you won't believe them anyway. You got to dig it out of the material like you're digging clams out of the beach. It's there, but you got to dig for it. Okay. So he was caught and executed by Herod, who was at that time the governor of Galilee. Now another of his brothers, an older brother, notice his name, Phasael, which is the Arab word Faisal. That's the Arab name Faisal. It's given in Greek here, Phasael, but it's Faisal. And see, Antipater is revered by the nations as if he were king. That's nonsense. So you know this is an Herodian writing this stuff. That Josephus is just co-opting. Yeah. He can't write this stuff because he didn't see any of it. So he's getting it from, I think, the source I told you. Okay, more about Hyrcanus being only retaining the name of king in name, and he was absolutely, totally powerless. And Herod is continuing doing whatever he wants, putting people to death. At least he's got that in there, in defiance of all Jewish law. And the Senate, or the governing body, proto-Sanhedrin, if you like, is not an evil body as they're portrayed in the Gospels. They're people who want to see justice done. And they want to bring Herod to trial for executing. So Hezekiah is not just a bandit. He is a heroic figure at that time to some, but we don't have the information. So they say that he should be tried for the breach of the ancestral law, which forbade execution without trial. Now that's the Jewish Sanhedrin, to my mind. But what does Herod do? He does what Cromwell did with the Parliament and what Napoleon did with the French Chamber of Deputies. He just walks in with what? With soldiers. Just chases them away. Comes in armed. And that's the end of that. And now in the Antiquities, the other work here, that's developed in more detail, and it introduces two other characters at that time. Pollio the Pharisee and Sameas. Now in Jewish history you have two famous people in rabbinic literature, Hillel and Shammai. There's little doubt that this Pollio was meant to be someone like Hillel. Now for Jews, and many Jews in this gospel, Hillel is the last name in perfection and beauty and wonderfulness. All he is an Herodian, basically apple polisher. But for the rabbinic literature, because his name is associated with lots of rabbinic, Pharisee rabbinic traditions, he's like something heroic. But he and Pollio, he and Sameas, there's another character they say it might be. There are pairs of people. The one pair previous to him was Abtilon and Shemaiah. So it's not clear if this Pollio is this guy or this guy. It's hard to say. So I don't want to be too cruel here. But in any case, in due course, Hillel does become the head of the Herodian Sanhedrin. Because Josephus tells us the only people that survived Herod's depredations on the Sanhedrin were Pollio and Sameas. That's in the Antiquities, it's not in the War. There's never all this in the War. Antiquities has these extra people. And they say he did this because at that time, Pollio and Sameas had predicted his future greatness. And in this particular episode, when he comes into the Parliament or the Sanhedrin here, Josephus' source says that Holy Samuel said, don't do anything to him. You know, he's going to be great in the end. So he remembered that. He killed everyone else in that Sanhedrin, but he didn't kill Holy Samuel. So he executed the whole Sanhedrin ultimately when he took power. That's Saddam Hussein. Or insane, Saddam insane, whatever. That's what we're dealing with here. You have to realize the brutality that we have here and the cruelty and the lack of any restraint in terms of brutality. Okay, so look, in 37 BC, 10 years later, Herod has fled Palestine. And in the middle of the civil war that now he's going to talk about here, Josephus, what's this next civil war? The first civil war was between Caesar and his colleagues. The next civil war is between who? Antony and Octavius for control of the empire, or the Roman, whatever you want to call it at this point, the coming empire. And you see, Octavius gets, actually Antony does represent Caesar's party to some extent. He was Caesar's favorite lieutenant in a way, but he's also Pompey's, in Pompey's army, as we see here in Palestine. This book tells us he was in Palestine with Pompey, Antony was. But he was also one of Caesar's favorite lieutenants, so he's trying to uphold the tradition of Caesar. He gets involved with Cleopatra, as Caesar had done previously, and he's sort of trying to be an Eastern potentate. And what Octavius cleverly does is conciliate all the Pompey people, but also keep the emperor title that Caesar was trying to get a hold of. And in doing so, he wins the civil war against Antony. And when he wins the civil war against Antony, Herod goes to him. He jumps from person to person. And basically, even though Antony was his previous supporter, he gives homage to Octavius. That is in here. And I don't know who. Originally, Antony sent him out with an army, but later on, Octavius confirmed it. But in 37 BC, Antony, that's the Battle of Actium is, I think, 33. That's 4 years before the Battle of Actium, where Antony gets finally destroyed by Octavius. He's given a Roman army by Antony, Mark Antony, that is. And at this time, there's all kind of unrest in Palestine because the Persians have come in. And they have sponsored this Antigonus, the only remaining son of Aristobulus, to take over the kingship and the high priesthood. So they have, taken advantage of Jewish nationalist sentiment. Are you following me here? So Antigonus gets the kingship for a bit under the Persians, but then Antony gives Herod an army. He comes back and he storms Jerusalem with Roman troops in 37 BC, and he takes over for good then. And then he has Antony execute Antigonus. Antony beheads Antigonus at Herod's bequest. That's in your book. I don't know if we'll get to it. I'm going to try to get to it now, okay? But I thought since we're on a topic, I'll make it clear. So let's keep moving through here, see if I can pick it up for you. Sometimes I can't pick it up for you because he's got so much material in here. Okay, so I think we're on page 59 or so. Antigonus went back to Jerusalem. And he's got Persian support here, I think. And he weds the daughter of Alexander, the son of Aristobulus, the granddaughter of Hyrcanus. Anyway, I can't follow all this. No, pardon me. This is Herod. Herod, though he was previously married to somebody else, marries into the Maccabean family. And she's the last Maccabean representative. And notice her name is Mariam. You see that? What is that here, page 59? Mm-hmm. And that's the Marys. She's the forerunner of all the Marys. Mariam is Miriam in Hebrew today. In Arabic it's Maryam. In English it's Mary. So this is the first Mary. that's coming into our consciousness, and she's the last Maccabean princess. So I can be sure that all the people naming their daughters Mary in the next generations are naming them after this very popular princess, the last hope of the Maccabean family. So Herod, you know, the Dead Sea Scrolls are against divorce on part of the ruler, and against marrying non-Jews. You will read all of that. So of course the scrolls would disprove all this stuff, particularly that he's multiplying wives and things. Anyway, he apparently what had happened here, and there's another tragic event coming up here, that she agreed to marry him on the condition that that he would restore her brother Jonathan to the high priesthood. Now, after he storms Jerusalem, he gets power and so on and so forth. I don't know, but my dates are a bit skewed here. You've read this more recently than me, but you can decide. You can fix it up. Does Herod keep the promise to restore this Jonathan to the high priesthood? What's he do? Huh?
Killed him.
Kills him. This is like, you know, this is what we're dealing with now. You know, I wish they put some of this stuff in the New Testament. You might have a bit more sympathy for the Jewish people if you put this kind of thing in. I think Jesus would expect it to, frankly, since we all know that he's supposed to be from the Jewish people, and I'm sure he cared about his people. He would like his people represented correctly. He wouldn't think that his death was the most important thing that ever happened in the whole universe from the beginning of time to the end of time. He would also want other people's death to be commemorated properly, not just his own. And that the people should be presented, their situation and plight should be presented in a sympathetic manner. But that's the point. It's not being written by people sympathetically. You say, well, this is God's word. It is God's word for people who are inspired by the belief in certain things, but it's written by human beings. And human beings have their failings, unfortunately. As we see in this horrendous account here, it's full of failings, but we can read through it. So, you know, I mean, where's the sympathy? Where's the charity? Where's, you know, all these virtues that are supposed to be there? Well, for this people in Palestine, there is no mercy. In any event, we'd like to hear about some of these horrible things. What happens to Jonathan is Herod puts on the high priestly garments as Herod promised her, and then when Herod sees the people started crying, people literally started crying. Now, I believe that. You say, how come you believe that? Because it makes sense to me. I know how people are. I would. They start crying, and so Herod he gets furious and jealous, like Saddam would, or Stalin would, or someone like that. And he takes him down to a swimming pool in Jericho and has his henchmen drown him in the swimming pool. That's the end of his promises to Miriam. And what's he finally do to Miriam? He finally gets her executed too, and everybody else. So you guys are reading this stuff, I thought, so I really shouldn't have to tell you this. Any case. So when Hyrcanus recommended Herod and his associates, notice this, Antony was delighted. Years before, he had been the guest of Herod's father, who had given him a royal welcome when Gabinius and he were invading Judea. So he appointed the two brothers tetrarchs. I guess this is the two Herodian brothers. So already, Antony had been conciliated by Antipater before, who had, you know, wined and dined him in Palestine. And so he's quite happy to more about the Feast of Pentecost. Antigonus here, the Jews flocked to Antigonus, page 60. So there's a civil war going on even at this time. Feast of Pentecost, a lot of fighting. You see, there's no peace in this country. There's no peaceful Galilee. This country is just totally riven by unrest for 150 years without cease. Literally from the time of Judas Maccabee, 250 if you want to consider that. Literally from the time of Judas Maccabee, but certainly from the time of the Romans storming the temple in 63 to the destruction of the temple in 70, which is 135 years. But if you want to consider the Maccabee period, you can add another 100 years. If you want to consider the Bar Kokhba uprising, which takes place 132 to 136, you're dealing with 250 years of constant revolutionary strife. The Jews won't give in. That's their main problem. Not like the Jews today, I might add. This is a different breed of people back here. quite amazing when I read about them, honestly, to my mind, which is why I teach this subject, because it's so captivating in many ways. Anyway, Galilee, you see, is a hotbed of revolutionary sentiment. When we came to Galilee, they found the inhabitants in a state of armed revolt. This is the real Galilee, not the peaceful fishermen scenes that we have. That's more like Paul's world in the Mediterranean, Asia Minor, or a place where Paul's traveled. The real Galilee is riven with unrest and revolutionary strife for all this place. Galilee is particularly riven in this way. Okay, and the Jews are always on the side of people like Antigonus. They're the popular people. Faisal is captured by Antigonus, Herod's brother, and he runs into a wall, supposedly, and kills himself, bashes his brains out. So Antony was really upset that Herod was driven out of the country by the Antigonus. And, but he hates Antigonus too at the end of this chapter. And all this fellow feeling. And by the way, when Herod's father is given Roman citizenship, the whole family gets Roman citizenship in perpetuity. So they're all Roman citizens from that moment on. I think that's where Paul got his Roman citizenship from myself, because I think Paul is from the Herodian family. And we have indication in the letters of Paul where he sends regards in Romans to his kinsman, the littlest Herod. At the end of Romans 16, he says, he calls him his kinsman, and Herod is not a common name. There's indication. I always thought Paul was Herodian anyway, but I think the Roman citizenship, is something unique here, and not many people had it. You have to give conspicuous service to Rome. You can't just get a Roman citizenship. And this family all have it. So that's something to keep in mind about where you get Roman citizenships from. Okay. So what happened, Masada comes to the fore in his chapter 3. Herod had put his brother-in-law there, and he had then married him there. Masada is this fortress along the Dead Sea that later becomes very famous in the uprising against Rome 100 years later. Here we have this situation here. I can't give it to you all, but Herod is coming down through the country. And he's at this place called Arbela, it says, which is in Galilee. And there are bandits there. And what do we have here in this? Remember our situation in the Maccabean books? One of these so-called bandits in the caves. And by the way, Josephus describes this in great detail, doesn't he? How he gets and butchers all these holdouts in the caves with their families. Is an old man, a father of 7 children. And Herod again is portrayed like Titus will be later, is begging the old man to come out, that he will spare him and his children. This is on page, what page is this on, 69? And the old man, his response was, one by one he ordered his children to come out, and he killed each son. And Herod, cut to the heart, stretched out his hand to the old man, begging him to spare his children. Oh, really? Oh, I'm sure of that. This is the 7 Brothers episode. I think this is the historical root of it here. I can't prove that, but I think this is what it's taken off. Then the poets get a hold of it, and you get the woman pleading with her children not to, and so on and so forth. But this is, I think, this is a 7 Brothers episode, and the 7 brothers all died. And the old man then mocks Herod, and after killing his wife too, he flings their bodies down from the precipice and leaps over the edge himself. Is this true? I don't know. Probably something like this really did happen. But you see how intent Herod is in getting these people? I've been to this place. It's a real rocky sort of area near the Sea of Galilee. And you could just picture the Romans on top of the cliffs, and then with baskets going down and fighting the people in the caves. These pictures are very well here. Do you all see them? I hope I'm not taking too much time for you. Look at this. His departure removed all restraint from the habitual troublemakers in Galilee. So we're in about 35 BC, and already Galilee is a hotbed of habitual troublemakers. So I just trying to show you what you can find in this book if you're interested. You say, well, why do you pay attention to this guy? Well, I don't. I think he's a liar, but I think these things he's got, unfortunately, without realizing, he's got it right. You know, maybe he doesn't. You'll be the judge of that. That's my opinion, and you have your opinion. In any case, we finally get Herod's 74 stormtroopers scaling the wall. These are all Roman troops. The Romans make fun of Antigonus, calling him Antigone. Who was Antigone? She's a hero of Greek tragedy, so they're laughing at his name, like Nazis would do that. But you see, Herod didn't, I guess he's taken him prisoner by this point. It was a frightful carnage. And the Romans do storm the temple after 4 months. And, but notice, very important, did Pompey do anything to the temple except go in and look? No, he just went in, and they say he was impious, and he was sacrilegious. He went into the inner sanctum, but didn't touch any of the treasure. Did Herod? No. According to this, and do I believe him? Well, I think so. He drove back force of arms, thinking victory more terrible than defeat if such people got a glimpse within the veil. He doesn't even let them go into the inner sanctum. He wants to ingratiate himself. And everyone wants to pillage. But he pays the soldiers, they say here, out of his own pocket. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the thing. We have to. It's important because the Habakkuk Pesher says that the Kittim, or the Yeter Ha'amim, plundered the temple and took the temple treasure. And to my mind, the only time that happened was when Titus and Vespasian stormed the temple in 70 AD and built the Roman Colosseum with the treasure. A real frightening turn of events to have the Hebrew temple turned into the Roman Colosseum. That's where they got the money from to build it anyway. That and selling prisoners as slaves. All the money they made off the Jewish war. Then they went and entertained the Roman populace with blood sports. It's a tragic period. So, Sosius was the Roman commander. He dedicated to God a golden crown, and bade farewell to Jerusalem. He took Antigonus to Antony. Who's Antigonus now? Not Antipater. Who is he? Aristobulus' second son. What happened to the first? He'd already been beheaded. What happens to this guy? He's beheaded too. Fallen ruler, clinging to life to the very end, though hope was dead, died as such a coward deserved by the axe. So, you know, there is a point of view here, right? Josephus says he's not going to be biased anymore. He said, well, why do you have a point of view for restoration? Oh, I just like to see a bit of fair play. I don't think this is fair. I mean, the facts are here. You pick through the facts, okay, but I'm sure Antigonus, see, the fact is Antigonus was beheaded, but I wouldn't add that he deserved to be because he was a coward. No, I don't think so. He was quite a brave fellow, it seems to me. He didn't make the mistake of treating all the citizens alike, however, King Herod now, you notice? He bestowed on, this is 37 BC, on all those who had taken his side. But the supporters of Antigonus, he liquidated. So we're getting the liquidation of all the resistors here. So that's why the Maccabean resistors are no longer the same by the time we get to the Sanhedrin and Jesus' time. Because he's going to make it clear in this book in the Antiquities that he took such vengeance on everyone, that anyone who resisted him he killed. And it's either this book or the Antiquities, I don't know, you're supposed to be reading this, not just me, that he says that he went around in disguise himself to see who was complaining against him. And then he'd go back and he'd take these people secretly to Macaroth, a fortress on the other side of the Jordan. That's where John the Baptist was executed, and tortured them and executed them, like Saddam Hussein did and was doing. Or this other fortress, Harakanya, and Josephus makes it, or his source makes it quite clear that that's what he used to do: take all the people who were resisting and torture and kill them, and he'd go around and check himself. Anyone he found complaining against him, he'd take them out and have them killed. This is the Jewish king. I want you to know that. The popular Jewish king who wants to kill Jesus. Oh, of course he wants to kill anyone who is going to be popular with the people who resist him. Since he's not popular and he's not a Jewish king. So the Antiquities goes deeper into this. And then see, Cleopatra and Herod didn't get on. So he sliced off large parts of their territory, including the palm grove at Jericho, which balsam is produced, and gave them to Cleopatra. Now that's interesting. You know the palm trees in Palm Springs, there was blight out here at the beginning of the century. They restored all the palm trees out here with palm trees from Jericho. The population, the climate out there in Palm Springs is very much like Jericho. You get pomelos and different things like that. And there were palm groves down there. What they were getting there was balsam. We found in Qumran, we found some jars of balsam. Some of the archaeologists found in certain clefts of rocks a jar of balsam. And they were getting it from there are palm groves down there even now, and they were getting, that's where they were producing it. Cleopatra wanted it. It was a rich place. I got to move along here. You can read more about this civil war here between Octavius and so on. Here's what Herod was doing, 81. In the 15th year of his reign, he restored the existing temple, enclosed it with an area double the former size. That's the modern temple that you see. It's an Herodian edifice. He didn't care what the cost was. He liked to build big things to impress the Romans. He built not just here, he built them everywhere, and also keep people quiet. He had great colonnades that ran around the entire temple, and a fortress that towered over one side of it, he named Antonia in honor of Mark Antony. His own palace he built in the upper city. And I cannot think further along on that page of any suitable spot in the kingdom that he left without some tribute of esteem to Caesar. This guy is the biggest sucker-upper going. He named cities in honor of the Caesars. Tiberias, Caesarea, Antonia. You know, this is a Jewish king, you see, who represents the interests of the people. He also did not neglect to make his own memory secure. He built fortresses. One he called Herodium. You can still go there today. It's an artificial hill, and on top it's a hollowed out round area which has a palace in it. Now he was buried somewhere there, but people are still looking for his grave, like Genghis Khan's. An artificial hill, the shape of a woman's breast, named it after himself, and some other fortresses that I told you about. So now, the next chapter, 4, in the back of it you have some of the genealogies of his various wives. He had 5 children by Mariam, 2 were girls. The youngest died at school in Rome. The 2 eldest were left. This is page 86. But she hated him passionately. So there's your clue to what's really going on here. She had good reason to be revolted by his actions. She openly took him to task for what? Oh, I didn't get the killing of her grandfather Hyrcanus, but he obviously executed Hyrcanus at some point. And her brother Jonathan, where was that? I don't want to miss that one. Oh, folks, where was that one? It's got to be in here somewhere. It's on 86?
Like a little more than 3/4 of the way.
Oh, is it? So I haven't gotten it yet. Okay, good. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there it is. Oh, yes, so he's going to tell him now. Okay, I'm sorry. Thanks. For he had not spared him, even though he was a youngster, because he had given him, as he had obviously promised, the priesthood in the 17th year. But after doing that, he immediately had him executed. Because there it is. When he put on the sacred garments, the priestly garments, and approached the altar during the feast, the whole crowd burst into tears. And the boy was therefore at night taken to Jericho. And by Herod's command, the Gauls, who were his mercenary guard, took him to the swimming pool and drowned him there. I think there's a bigger description in the Antiquities where they all said they're playing with him there, you know, with a pool or something, with a ball or something like that. I don't know. And they drowned him. I guess you would be upset by a husband like this, right? And he finally charges her with adultery with his sister, the husband of his sister Salome, who he wants to get rid of, a guy called Joseph. I hate to tell you, but this is the first Joseph and Mary story. Heather has a brother-in-law called Joseph, and he had charged him with adultery with his wife Mary, to get rid of both of them. The Romans don't like that he does this kind of thing. But he has them executed because he said when he went to Rome to get the kingship from Octavian, he had left her in his charge in Masada, the fortress by the Dead Sea, and he claimed that there was some hanky-panky with it. Further along here on 93, these family races are really important because now you're getting a kingship like the Saudi family in Arabia. He has another relative called Costa Bar, and her Salome's next husband. The Salome's got a lot of husbands. He gave her her hand after the execution of her former husband. I don't think that guy lasts too long either, because he's considered a little bit too too independent-minded. I think Herod gets rid of him too. This is a great guy. Finally, and at the end of this chapter, he puts his own children to death by Miriam. Miriam's sons by him, because he's jealous that they're more popular than he is. That, I think, is where Herod wanting to kill the Jewish children comes from. He is willing to kill anybody, but he actually kills his own children by Miriam. Executes them. She's already been executed. He sent them to Rome to be brought up, but then, of course, why would the crowd prefer them to him? The Maccabean blood. They've still got some Maccabean blood. And this continues to be the preferred line in his family, even though he's got 10 wives with lots of offspring. You watch the line with Maccabean blood. That's the only line that has any claim to the people's interest. I don't even say affection. Agrippa I, Agrippa II are all part of that line. So is Herodias. Why is everyone trying to marry Herodias in the story of John the Baptist? Because not only is she rich, she's got the Maccabean blood from Mary. She's a granddaughter. But we'll get to that. Okay, I think Herod's murder, this guy is going to murder. Does anyone wonder that by chapter 9 we get to the outbreak of the war? I mean, this is like, of course, it's not something you want to read for everyday pleasant reading. This is gruesome stuff. But it also, I mean, gives you a different picture of Palestine than what you get from other environments. And I hope, I don't give a damn what Mel Gibson thinks or says or does, but maybe one day someone will send him a copy of this to read, and he might have a tour history of what really went on in Palestine. And he might, tongue might stick to the roof of his mouth with that sort of slander that's in his mind. Okie dokie, so we'll take a break, and